This conference will now be recorded.
All right. I'm so glad all of you are here today. Our lesson is, and I am hoping everybody got their handouts for today. All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us for fun. Today we're talking about freestanding and embroidery. And when I hear the term freestanding embroidery, I immediately think of lace. But there are 3 different types of freestanding embroideries. And I don't know what happens to all the stuff that I've got stitched out, but I have some samples of everything except the ones that are total thread lace. I have some, and I don't know if you can see, the light is fickle here. These are little flowers that I embroidered out this morning. And I did them on 2 layers of organza. So this is an example of embroidery with fabric. All right. And there's other ones, and I have a tendency to like to do them on organza. There's a butterfly. There's 3 flowers in a set, and we'll talk about that in a bit. I'm pretty sure that these designs are on the My Sewnet library. There's a whole collection of hearts, and then this was a Jenny Haskins design, I believe. Well, you're not helping, are you? Let's see if we can do something over here. That way. This is a little butterfly and it is done on, or is it? Maybe it's not. No, it's done on organza. And I have a tendency, unless a lace design is really sturdy, I have a tendency to want to put it on something like organza, which on this one, it's very obvious that there's organza behind it. But on some of the others, like this butterfly, it really doesn't show that much. And there are different kinds of organza. Some of them are very transparent. So even though it says it is totally freestanding, there's no reason, if you are going to put it like in a garment or something and you want some more stability, there's no reason to not put some organza in there to give it a little more heft and a little more body. Some of the freestanding things definitely would not hold up without something like organza in them. For instance, this one with all the little dots, and this part in the center is totally unconnected, if you will, from the rest of it. So it definitely needs some kind of fabric behind it. All right. There is another category of what they call freestanding, where you are going to use fabric in your pieces and then you're going to layer them together to make a design or an element or a design or whatever. And as we look at the things on what they have in the various categories, you will notice there is some overlap on the ones that are freestanding on fabric and what they call freestanding pop-ups, which means that they're layered. So there's some crossover where you make a series of freestanding on fabric and then you stack them up, and usually a lot of times there's an additional design which puts them together for you. And then let's see. Well, this one that is used in the project today was not intended to be like this. It was intended to be freestanding as an insert in fabric, but the lady who writes our projects decided to make it look a little different by leaving some of the fabric in the design and making it like an applique as well as a freestanding lace design. So, are there any questions about any of that so far? Okay, and there are lots and lots of designs in our already built into our machine, and of course on the Sewnet my Sewnet library there are many designs. Okay, what we're going to do now is take a look at some of these designs. So let me get out of my screensaver here and go to my help center and the techniques and tutorials, embroidery techniques, and there is one called freestanding embroidery. And it shows us then the 3 different categories of what that they consider freestanding designs. And the first is our thread only. So if we touch that, of course, it gives us our tutorial. And then when we touch content, it shows us the designs that are built into the machine that they consider thread only. And I was really curious because this first one, this butterfly, looks like it's completely filled in. But when you actually look at the butterfly itself, again, it looks pretty much filled in, but if you go and look at it color by color, let me move it down a little. There's lots and lots of thread in there. So this is all the first color thread. This is the second color. And this is the third color, which is kind of an outline. And then that is the last color. So truly that is a thread only design, which I was skeptical about when I first saw it. And I did, if you want to look in your embroidery sampler book, let's see, thread only. The butterfly is in section 4, number 18. If you want to look in your book and then see the directions for stitching that out. Let's see, 418. Okay. And the only directions that they show in the book, which I don't know if you can see here. Okay. It shows just the 4 colors of thread. It shows water soluble stabilizer and then rinsing it out. So it's a very straightforward, uncomplicated design. It just is gonna, there's 7,000 plus stitches in there. So it's gonna take a little while to stitch out, but it's going to be stable once it's stitched out, and you could do it on organza if you really wanted, but then if you do it on organza, then you're going to need to either a totally freestanding one, you're going to need to and cut it out with like a heat tool or something to trim your organza, or at least I would prefer to do it with a heat tool rather than trying to do it with scissors, because somehow I always manage to clip a few stitches when if I'm using scissors to trim something. So if you do something that is totally freestanding on organza, I suggest that if possible, you use rayon thread because with a heat tool, the rayon thread will not melt. A polyester thread will melt with the heat tool. So you need to be aware of that if you're planning to use a heat tool to cut an embroidery out. All right. So let's go back to our content. And this one is an unusual one. Let's see, that's in section 2, number 160. And it's just makes kind of a lattice thing, and it is totally freestanding, so it could be used like an overlay on something. In fact, when I'm looking at the picture in the book, it has it set up as an endless design. It has the little corner stitches, so you can match them up as you go along with those. So you can make a long piece of that if you wanted to. The next two are for yarn. And if you've been around when Karen Charles is at the store, she has a whole afghan made out of a freestanding yarn design where she made all sorts of different colors of yarn and stitched them together to make a whole afghan out of a design like number 4 here. The number 5, 6, and 7 are in your Christmas section, number 7 section in your book. And then 8, 9, and 10 are lace, like you would buy lace by the yard at the store, only you could stitch out your own as kind of an endless design, and those are in section 5 of your manual, of your sampler book. And I did not take the time to write all these down for you, and it's really hard to see 9 and 10 even for me because they're white on a white background. Excuse me. Okay. I'm sure that there are many of these designs on the My Sewnet library. Let me dispatch my butterfly here. All right, so now if I go back and we look at the fabric freestanding with fabric designs, these are a little bit different in that it's expecting you to actually use some fabric. And one of these designs I would like us to stitch out in class today, and that's what these 3 little flowers that I stitched out today are 9, 10, and 11 in this collection here, and they are in section 3, number 78, 79, and 80 in your sampler book. And what's different about them is you're putting water-soluble stabilizer in your hoop, and then you're stitching out, you're putting your fabric on top of the stabilizer, and then you're stitching out your first stitch, which is like the place, or not, it's like the tack down stitch for an applique. And then you will take your hoop off of the machine and trim your fabric up to that tack down stitch once it is stitched out. Actually, if you look at the book, and let's see if I can get it so you can see it. No, it's going to be difficult. Okay. The camera is really picky about the light. Okay, so it shows water soluble stabilizer, and then putting your fabric down, and then trimming your fabric, and then washing it out. So it's almost like doing an applique, but you do not have fabric as your background in your hoop. What you have in your hoop is just water soluble stabilizer. So you can actually I just put the fabric in there to start with, but you can use that first color as a placement line and then do the tack down and trim your fabric as if it were an applique, and then finish stitching it out. And once you're finished, then you cut it out of the water soluble stabilizer and rinse it out. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? And the book is, the pictures and the sequence of stitch out are very helpful. And those 3 little flowers that I stitched out this morning, there's this larger design where you would stitch out the leaves in the background, and then where these little arrows are in the sequence, or triangles in the sequence, you would put one of the flowers down and it would stitch the center of the flower. When you stitch the flower originally, there's nothing in the center because the center is left open. So when you add it to this background of leaves, there's 2 colors. There's a center circle and then lots and lots and lots of little dots around it that affix it to whatever you have your leaves stitched on. And down at the bottom of there's 3 triangles because there were 3 flowers, and then down at the bottom it tells you for step number 4 you're going to use the flower that was design 3078. So it's telling you exactly where on that background and when you need to put that particular flower down. Okay. And of course, if you didn't want to use this as the background, but you wanted to be able to get the centers in your flower, then you can take the design into your software and borrow the center part and then add it to the individual flowers or wherever you're going to use them. Any questions on that one? Okay. All right. Let's see. So now the design that we're using in our project is in this freestanding design with fabric. And it's number 12. And it is in, let's see, it is in section 6, number 64 or 65. There's two designs, number 12 and 13, are actually in section 6 there. Okay, then our last category of freestanding is pop-up. Hello, pop-up here. And you will notice that some of the designs that you see right off the bat are the same ones you saw with fabric category, particularly these first 3 here, and then the 3 little flowers that I've been talking about, except in the pop-up category for those 3 little flowers, they have included that background design. So you have the whole thing in this category. You don't have to go find it for yourself. And like 19 through 22 is eventually becomes one design. So there are multiples like the dragonfly from 12, 13, and 14 here. They go together to make a really, really pretty dragonfly, which is pretty good size. And this thing that looks like a little target here on number 18 is actually the assembly design for 15, 16, and 17, where it's just stitching. You can see that 15 and 16 have like a circular cutout so that these circles attach those pieces onto your background fabric.
Judy,
Yeah, Peggy.
I don't know if it's my computer, but you're a little bit fuzzy. I don't know if anybody else is noticing that. You're out of focus.
Well, I have no focus capability on this camera. It's an autofocus. So I'm
No,
sorry.
I don't know if anybody's seeing it, but maybe it's me. You're a little bit out of whack.
I'm sorry. I don't have a fancy enough camera that I can focus it. It's supposed to be an autofocus.
Yeah, usually you're right on, but it's not real crisp.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It was having a headache this morning, and I don't know what what
My
kind of
computer.
medicine to give it. So I
Okay.
apologize for that. All right. So because these, I wanted you to practice something that we're talking about today. And so I asked you to have a 120 by 120 hoop and to put wash away mesh stabilizer in it, and then to have a piece of fabric to go in it. And I'd like for us to stitch out one of these little flowers like this one, that like I stitched out today, but I was going, this time I wanted to stitch it on some fabric instead of just stitching it on some organza. So if you have the supplies, or if you just want to watch, then that's fine. Let's see, I do have my 120 by 120 hoop, so I'm going to, and I did, when you stitch out something that is totally thread, you definitely want to be able to have the bobbin thread and the needle thread be the same. So you want to wind a bobbin with whatever thread you're going to use in the needle for a thread only design. For the ones on fabric, or the ones that are the pop-up, you have the option of using regular embroidery bobbin thread if you want. But if the design is going to be such that you can see the back of it, like if you had, if these three little flowers were, if you were going to stack them up, and one is definitely much smaller or offset from the other, you probably want to match your thread in the needle and the bobbin, so that if for some reason they get popped up a little, that you don't see something that looks different on the back. You would like them to be the same on the back as well as on the front. Does that make sense? So I have the same thread in my bobbin as I have in my needle for this. Okay. So let's see. Let's do this. Come down, come up, or behave. All right. So there are 5 colors to this. And the first one is your placement line for your design, which is going to stitch just on the stabilizer. Okay, and I do have a size 75 needle, embroidery needle in the machine, because I've found that when I'm doing applique, that the 75 needle is kinder to the fabric than a 90 needle, because it doesn't make as big a hole or doesn't ruffle up the edges quite as much as a size 90 needle. So our second step is our tack down. Why it's not trimming. Okay, and now we need to trim our excess fabric. Okay, and let's see. And I did put some best press in my fabric today.
Did we lose Judy?
I think so. I did.
Oh, I did too.
I did too.
Uh-oh. She went to Never Never Land.
Yeah, she's frozen. I'm telling you, there's something going on today.
Oh, I know. I had trouble with both computers this morning. I didn't know if I was going to get on.
Yeah.
Judy, can you hear us? She's talking, it looks like, but I can't hear.
I'm frozen screen.
Yeah.
Elizabeth,
just-
fix it.
Yeah, I'd like to.
I
There you are.
Whoops. I texted her.
Okay, what's going on here?
You went to Never Never Land.
It's not even Friday the 13th.
No. That's awful.
Look, you got it all cut out.
Is she still frozen? Yeah, we got something going on.
Yeah, her mic's gone again.
Ugh. Just when it gets interesting.
All right, okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Thank you.
Yes.
I swear there's sunspots or something. Okay, are we back together now?
we
Can you hear
are.
me? Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, thanks for your patience. I do not know what happened.
And we can even see you moving. Before we could see, but not moving.
Okay, anyhow, I got the thing trimmed and I got the hoop back on, and now this is going to, I could hear you the whole time. It was just that you couldn't hear me, and I don't know why. But we'll continue and see what we're doing here. All right, so now this is going to do a little zigzag stitch around the edge. And there are a lot of stitches in the center of the flower for like decoration, but they're all straight stitches, so they don't take a lot of time to do, and they don't make the flower heavy. I mean, it's kind of a delicate fill for, or accents in the details in the flower. So it's just straight stitching back and forth to give the flower some texture. So basically, the freestanding designs with fabric are an applique, but you're not doing them on a second fabric. You're doing them on water-soluble stabilizer. Or at least that's how I think of them. And then the pop-ups are just multiples of these freestanding designs on fabric, but they're stacked up to make a three-dimensional design. when I was stitching out these designs on the organza, the petals for some reason, got really puffy. But then when this straight stitching was going on, it flattened them out for me. So if that happens to you, don't panic. Particularly on these designs, it will fix it. And as I'm watching this stitch out, I'm thinking, you probably could take a lot of just regular applique designs and treat them this way to make them a freestanding design. If you had an applique that you wanted to put on something that was difficult to hoop or almost impossible to hoop, and you still wanted to put that applique on there, why couldn't you stitch it out like this on water soluble and then glue it or hand stitch it or whatever to whatever you wanted it on? Seems to me that should work. What do you think? Okay, so our last step is just the satin stitch around the edge of this. Okay, I'm going to stop that because is anybody stitching out with me or not? Mary is? Okay. How
I am
far are you?
too. I am.
Lori, are you stitching?
Yes, of course, I'm doing design number 1 because I wanted those leaves, and I'm almost finished with the flower. Yeah.
Okay, well then I'll go ahead and let this work while you are stitching.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, now that it's finished, here am I. I'm sitting here with these little, the flowers I stitched out earlier and thinking, well, I could layer the matching one on top of that and make it a 3-dimension, or I could put the littler one on the organza one on top of the fabric one. So you have lots of options. So now all I need to do is to cut away my excess stabilizer and then wash that out. And when I washed out the organza ones, they had a tendency to get a little misshapen on me, and I just flipped, once they were fairly dry, I flipped them over and just pressed them from the back and they were fine. So, but by using the same color thread on the bobbin, I think it makes a much nicer stitch out, and will be, you know, if you put them onto something, it would look a lot nicer with the backside matching rather than it being an even white. It's a personal choice. So Mary, are you finished stitching out? Or do you need more time?
No, I'm done here.
Okay, great. All right.
And I agree with you. I think if you're going to do something that's not flat against fabric, and you want it to match on the back, because you want it to be pretty.
Yeah, because, you know, I'm thinking, and I've seen all sorts of garments where they have attached these 3D freestanding things, and it's certainly, especially if you're going to wash them, they're not going to stay laying flat as they did when you first put them on there.
They end up looking homemade if they don't match.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Lori, are you okay?
Sorry, I gotta use my microphone. Yeah, there's my flower.
Oh, very nice. So what are you going to do with it?
I like
I want to do the leaves, and then I'm going to use it as a gift on a gift for the gift tag. Does that make sense? On a gift?
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Very
Yeah.
nice.
That's a real clever idea.
And what are you going to do with yours, Mary?
I don't know, but that's a clever idea that Lori came up with.
Yeah,
So
that would be,
I just had to read, talking about craziness, I couldn't get it to my machine to recognize my finger swipes. I had to reboot it and now it's fine. So
I had to do the same thing this morning.
I don't know what's going on, but it's got to be
It's
sunspots.
spooky, isn't it?
That's our story and we'll stick with it.
Okay. All right. Now I'd like to take a little bit of time and talk about our project today. I fell in love with this thing when I stitched it out, and it takes about an hour to stitch out one of these medallions. So it's not a quick project, but after I had stitched it out, I told myself, you got to figure out some place to use this. So, and what the sample is stitched on is real linen. So I thought it would be really cool to have like a linen jacket with a row of these down the back. But because when I stitched it out, there were some of these really fine, let me use this. There were some of these really fine places that it didn't really connect. If I put it in a garment, for two reasons, I would put some organza behind it, because being in a garment, it's going to get more stress, and it's going to get pulled this way and that way and be washed and so forth. So I definitely would put some organza behind it for stability. And then I went in and I actually was able to use some fabric glue to reconnect the ones. But if I had the organza behind it, it would have stayed where it should have been. And it would, even if it didn't quite connect, it would still be connected to the organza and not be loose. So I happened to find in my stash of way too much fabric that I had this piece of pink that looks like linen, but it doesn't. It's got to have some man-made fibers in there, because it does not wrinkle like linen, because this is out of the washer and dryer and no ironing. So it's not acting like real linen, but it looks like linen and feels like linen. So that's good enough for me. All right, so I wanted to go through the instructions in the project, because what happens is that Deb has altered the sequence of things as they stitch out for this design to look like this. All right. So if you want to follow along in your project instructions, and let me, come on, delete. Let me follow her instructions and have a piece of fabric in a hoop, just because that'll make the machine happy to have a hoop on to go through these instructions. So I'm on page 2, and we need to load our design, which I could do from, I could go back to the it's not a pop-up, it is a freestanding with fabric. And if I go to content, it is number 12 there. So I do not know why you brought it into that hoop, but she tells us to use our 240 by 150 hoop, and it fits very nicely in that hoop. Okay. And let's see. She says to go to, still on page 2, number 4, she's saying to go to our edit design and make sure that our design is centered in our hoop, which I just did. All right, so she had you draw 2 lines to find the center of your fabric in your hoop, and then let's go to stitch out and get our hoop attached.
Judy, before you get too far,
Yes, ma'am.
she never talks about hooping the stabilizer, and that's a topper, right? The dissolve away topper, or what did you use when you stitched it out for stabilizer underneath?
Oh, okay. Inspire, dissolve away.
Or am I totally missing it somewhere? I just
No,
didn't see it.
I'm not familiar with Dissolve Away as a name of a stabilizer.
I
Um,
wasn't, I wasn't.
I use Aqua Magic.
Yeah, that's what I would have used, but I looked it up. And because I hadn't heard of it except for the Dissolve Away Tearaway,
Yeah.
and it talks about it being used as a topper or underneath lace
Huh, really?
on the internet. Yeah. Okay, so but you use the Aqua Magic.
Yeah, the same thing that I just used for that little flower.
Okay, thanks. That's
Well,
what I
that's a good catch on your part. I appreciate that.
yeah, I hadn't heard of it and I didn't have any, so okay, thanks.
I mean, and it worked fine. But again, I say, if I were, if I ever get to creating a garment and putting these on there, I certainly will put, besides the wash away mesh stabilizer, I will be putting a layer of organza. I will be hooping it with the stabilizer and the fabric. And the organza will be on the wrong side of the fabric so that I can trim it when I get done.
Judy, is organza nylon?
Organza anymore is pretty much polyester. There is nylon organza, there is silk organza.
Okay,
I
but
mean,
and that's what okay, and you were saying use rayon so then you can burn it, or is that right?
well, I'm saying use rayon thread.
Oh, yes, okay.
Okay, because rayon thread will not melt, but polyester thread will melt.
Okay, thank you.
If you're really good and quick, you can use polyester thread, but I almost always end up with a little mashed up spot because it melted. So rayon thread is a better option if you're going to use a heat tool. All right. Alrighty. Now, she has very specific, I'm on page 3 and number 8, where she says touch your color block options and make sure you're in ghost mode so that you see exactly what's going to be stitched out at that point. Okay, now I wasn't intending to actually stitch this out because of the time involved, but I wanted to go through the steps that she used in making a modified stitch out for this. So she's going to stitch the first color, which you see on my screen is basically an outline of the design. And normally once that's stitched out, you would completely trim out the whole shape. So you would have just a big hole in your fabric. And she's saying, don't do that. All right. And then color number 2 is another place where it's just a double stitch outline. And again, you are not going to trim, which she tells you, on step number 10. And then she has in blue a little note that says, when you get to color number 1.3, we're going to skip the satin stitch border and just stitch out the inner flower line. So normally when you're doing like a reverse applique and you've trimmed out the piece of fabric that you want to get rid of, it will come in and do a satin stitch border, but she doesn't want to do that satin stitch border, which is on color number 3. And you can see here on color number 3 on my screen that the satin stitch border is there, but there is also an outline of the flower, this part that still has fabric in it in the design. So she wants you to, on page number 4, to, in your stitch out progress, when you're on design or color number 3, you're going to go into your go to stitch and bring up the number pad, and you are going to enter 2257, and that's going to put you, that's going to skip that satin stitch border, and you are then going to just be stitching the outline of the flower. That makes sense? And she will have you go back later on and put and stitch in that satin stitch border. So don't think that we're not going to have that in our design. Okay. Now then, on after you've stitched out the
Judy, why did she do that?
because she wants to leave fabric under the flower here. She doesn't want that to be just stitching. She wants to have fabric under it.
Okay.
Because normally once you had stitched out color number 1, you would have trimmed out this whole octagon and
Okay.
had nothing there
Okay, I gotcha.
except the stabilizer.
Okay.
Okay. So she's wanting to leave that fabric as part of the design, which really makes it pretty, I think. Okay, so now once you have stitched out that and the machine has gone on to step number 4, which is what takes the longest time, she tells you to, on number 12, she says, remove the hoop from the machine, but don't unhoop it. And then you're going to trim the fabric that was around the flower. And this is what gets trimmed out. I saved that piece to show you because that is what was around the flower. You're trimming it on the outside and you're trimming it you're trimming around the flower, and you're also trimming it completely out of the fabric. So this is the shape of the fabric that you're going to trim out and leave the rest of the fabric in the design.
And the mesh that's behind it, the washable, right?
Right. You don't trim out the mesh, you just trim out the fabric.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, because you need that mesh left in there.
So
right.
Judy,
Yes.
since then you've got a loose piece of fabric in the middle of your hoop, right? In the middle. And so did you have trouble with it moving, or what did you do?
Well, no, because what we stitched out here was this outline. So it nailed the fabric down to the stabilizer.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. I lost my brain. I guess
That's all right.
Say that again.
I need
Judy?
to be rebooted.
Okay, when we skipped this satin stitch outline
Yeah.
before, but we did stitch out the outline of the flower, that nailed the fabric down to the stabilizer because we trimmed outside of that stitching to
Okay,
get this piece out.
yep,
Okay?
yeah, thank you.
So we now have a hole between the flower and all we see in here right now is stabilizer, but this flower and the leaves, if you will, are still fabric, but there's a hole around it where we see the stabilizer. All right. Okay, now the machine, because stitching that flower was the last thing in color number 3, the machine is going to go ahead and go on to step 4. But we're going to go back to step 3 and we're going to touch, which she calls monochrome, but my machine says one color. We're going to touch that so that it makes it all, it doesn't stop when it finishes color number 3. So on page 5, it then you're basically going to stitch out color 3 again, and it's because it's going to stitch the satin outline and then it's going to repeat stitching that flower. It's okay, we've already trimmed our fabric out and it's just going to stitch over the stitching that it did before. All right, we've stepped back to pick up the satin outline around the edge of the design, this satin outline, and then it's going to repeat stitching this straight stitch around the fabric that we left in on the hoop when we trimmed out the outer parts. And so it's going to stitch out number 3, and then because we've done monochrome, it's going to also stitch out number 4, which is all of the lacy stuff. And at that point, that particular design is complete. You've gotten one copy, or if you will, you've stitched out one design. So now she wanted to have several designs down the middle of her table topper that she was making. So she did not want these medallions right next to each other. She wanted a spacer, and what she put in there was a little diamond. And the diamond she has on the bottom of page 5, the instructions for creating that diamond. You need to go to, let's see, it's gonna get it, that's okay. We're gonna go to sewing. So we can go to home, maybe not. Cancel. I don't care.
And stitch out, Judy, not edit.
Huh?
You have to get out of stitch out. You have to go back to edit to move.
Thank you. As not doing it. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. All right. So I'm going to go back to sewing. Go away. Oh, I can't go to sewing with a hoop on, that's for sure. With all that's happened, my brain says something's not right.
Well,
Okay.
no, it's the first reaction, isn't it?
Oh, okay. So now we need to find the stitch that she used. I'm on page 5, number 15 at the bottom. So we need to go to category 4, our satin elements, and we want category 4-2, and we want number 8, which is, it's also not gonna play with the single hole plate on. Okay. All right. So now stitch number 8. Thank you very much. So this is what we want, is that stitch. So turn the page to page number 6, and we loaded the stitch, and then we want to go to edit stitch, and we want to change the stitch length to 16. Oh, how did I get to density? I want the stitch length to be 16 and the stitch density, which is the toggle right underneath stitch length, and it comes in at density 0.4. We want it to be 0.3. And then you want to save that modified stitch so you can use it in embroidery. So if you touch your heart to save it, and I already saved mine as I'm just going to call it ND, New Diamond. So now I have saved it, and then I can go back, maybe, to embroidery. And say, okay. And now I'm going to, let's see, the icons that she shows in the handout were done prior to icon 2, so they are just the icons. That sounds crazy. Anyhow, the pictures aren't matching what's on our machines for right now, but that's okay. We're going to bring the diamond by touching the folder. We're going to, I'm sorry.
Can I stop you for just a minute?
Yeah.
I don't remember if we could do this under the regular icon or not, but we could have done all that right in embroidery edit. We didn't have to go back to sewing because you've got a way to modify the stitch.
Right.
And could we have done that on just the regular icon? Would it let you modify the stitch in embroidery edit?
I don't know. Peggy, answer that question for Mary. Or Lee. Because you both have the regular icon. And Lori.
To be honest, right now I haven't tried it, but I think you can. In the regular icon.
Okay, because I just didn't know if you had an edit stitch under the icon. Oh, I have my book. Okay. Anyway, so it just seemed like an extra step that you really didn't have to take. You could do it all under edit.
Well, you know what, Mary?
Come to class, Mary.
This might have been, this paper's written out for the icon, so maybe not. Maybe the icon 2 will let you do what you're talking about. But if this lesson's written for just the icon, maybe not.
Well, that's what Mary was asking.
Yeah, and I haven't tried it. I mean, I'll have to place some more. I just need to find the time.
Looking at my icon book, not the icon 2, but I have the old icon book. There is an edit stitch on the embroidery edit screen.
I'm
So
sorry, what was that?
there is an edit stitch on the embroidery edit screen on the regular icon.
Okay, so then you should be able to do it. Okay, so what
Right.
Mary is talking about is if we brought the stitch into, I'm in embroidery edit, and if I brought that same stitch and if my
Yes,
fingers worked into embroidery, well,
I just went into my embroidery stitch edit.
yeah,
So it is possible.
okay, so now I can bring that stitch up and I can touch edit stitch and I can change the length. Oh, okay. When I'm changing the length in embroidery edit, I don't have the finite adjustment that I can do in sewing in edit stitch, because when I change the length, I go from 21. When I touch the minus, I am at 16.9, and Deb wanted it to be 16. So that, and you don't have a density adjustment. So in order to be able to do a more exact adjustment and to be able to adjust the density as well, you need to go back to sewing.
The density's on the right of the length.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. I
But you're
wasn't,
right, you couldn't get it as if you were a real specific number like the 16, you couldn't do it.
right. So that's why, evidently why she went back to sewing. Okay. But thanks for bringing that up. I learn a lot from you. Okay, so yes, I want to delete everything. So now I need to go back to my, okay. All right, so I need to be back in my 240 by 150 hoop. And I want to bring in my stitch that I made and saved. So there it is. And then I want to, I'm on page 6, about the middle of number 17, where she says touch edit. And okay, she wants to move that. Come on. Thank you. She wants us to put that stitch at a specific place. So for minus 0.0, where's my poker? 0.2. Okay, so that moved it there. And then she wants us to change where it is as far as the height. And she wants that to be 79. And say, okay. So now it's moved it slightly to the left and up close to the top of our machine. So now we're going to go get our medallion design, which is in the category called this and that. And we're going to pick design number 64, which is our medallion. Okay, and we want to center that in our hoop. And once you've done that, then you see that the diamond is connected to the top of the hoop of the medallion design. So when you stitch that out, it will stitch that little diamond stitch and then do the medallion. Okay, and then she goes through instructions about rehooping, rehooping your fabric, and gives you a picture of about where you need to have your original medallion in the hoop in order for the second one and the diamond to line up easily. All right. And you'll notice that on the bottom of the medallion, there are just a few little satin stitches that stick out from each point on that medallion. So when you line up your diamond with the previously stitched one, you can put the point right over a couple of those little satin stitches. Okay, and let's see what we can see here. Stop sliding. It's hard to tell, but when I put it the second with the diamond and the medallion together, when I put them in, I barely put the point over the little satin stitches that were at the bottom of that first medallion. Okay, and you can make it look like whatever you're comfortable with, and you can make it, whoopsie, didn't want to do that. Thank you, undo button. You can make it look like it does on the screen, where you can see a couple of the satin stitches and then the diamond kind of overlap. The very point of the diamond overlaps them just a little tiny bit. And you're using precise positioning to get it exactly where you want it. So now, let's see, I'm on page 9. Once you've got your, okay, I'm not on page 9, I'm sorry, I'm on page 8. Okay, now make sure that when you get ready to stitch this out, and I don't have, I'm not in stitch out, so I will be here. Okay. She says make sure that you touch and make sure that your monochrome is not on, because you don't want it to just blow through your whole design, because you want to do this thing with color 3 that we did on the first time. However, down at the bottom of page 8, she gives you a specific stitch number again, but because you've added that diamond into the design, the stitch number is different than it was the first time, because you've added, however many stitches are in that diamond to the design. So your stitch number that you're on the bottom of page 8 in number 28, the stitch number that you're going to advance to when you get to color 3 on your second and subsequent medallions is going to be 2306 instead of the number that you used previously on, I guess it was on, was on page 4. There's a different number you used 2257 on page 4, but when you are on page 8 and you've had that diamond added to your design, you're going to use stitch number 2306 to skip past that satin stitch on the outside of the medallion. All right. So scooch you over here, friend. So when you get to color number 3, instead of going to the number that's on stitch that's on page 4, you're going to go to stitch 2306. And that's going to take you to the stitch out of the flower and skip that satin stitch so you can trim out the fabric around the flower and out of the octagon. And then you will go back to, once it'll go to number 4 when you've finished stitching out around the flower, and you take the hoop off and put it back on. You're going to go back to stitch number 3 and let it stitch out that satin stitch and the flower again, and then go on to stitch number 4. And that's how you will use the routine of lining up the diamond and using the larger number on page 8 for every successive copy of the medallion that you stitch out. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. I like when you shake your head yes. All right, and in talking about finishing the table runner, she has you do a hem that uses the wing needle. I did her recommended way of hemming it, and it worked. It looks kind of like a hem stitch. It's got little holes in it, as you can see, but she had a raw edge on the back. Recently in a project with the Viking workbook, there was a project where they had instructions for a hem stitch hem, which is this one, and it's a little bit different, and it uses a double fold on the back side so you don't have a raw edge. So I was going to show you how that one worked, as opposed to, her instructions are very straightforward for doing the hem, but I was going to show you the one that we did on the Viking project, and then you would have your choice of doing it however you liked. If you ever wanted to do a hem stitch looking hem on a fabric like linen, and it needs to be a fabric where you can pull a thread out of the fabric to mark a line for you. Okay, so you decide how big a hem you want, and you make a double fold, and you pull the thread right at the top of that double fold. Okay, let's see if I can get it, the light shines. Then that double fold goes right up to that line where the thread is pulled. And then, let's see, get my feet. I need to and you need to use a wing needle. And if you don't know that you have a wing needle, the package of needles that came with your machine, right in the middle of the package is a wing needle. Okay, and that's what a wing needle looks like. It looks like it has little extra metal on either side of the shaft of the needle, making it much wider than a regular needle. And because of that, you cannot use the needle threader on your machine, because the needle threader is made to fit around the sides of the needle. And with this one being larger, you can just, get your needle threader out of alignment, or you can just do things that you really don't want to do to your needle threader by trying to use it with a wing needle. So keep that in mind if you're going to use a wing needle with your machine. And so you have to do it the old-fashioned way. And the stitch that you're going to use is like a blanket stitch. So the stitch is on our machines, it is in category 3, subcategory 2, and it's stitch number 2. And it won't let me do that because I still have my straight stitch plate on. So we'll fix that. Okay, now I can do that. All right, now, and the settings for the length and width of it are, the width is 3 and the length is also 3. The default is 3, but you want to move the position of the needle to +1. Okay, so your position is 1, your width is 3, and your length is 3. You're going to stitch from the wrong side of the fabric so you can keep track of the folded edge, and the right swing of the needle needs to go into that line where you have pulled the thread. So this is going to go really slow to start with, at least. And I still have my pink thread in there and you want to match your top and bottom threads. And if you were doing it on linen, you might want to use a cotton thread rather than an embroidery thread for this. All right. So let's see what we can do here. Oh yes, and we'll use the IDT to make the machine happy. Oh, well, I turned my fabric wrong. Stop. Let's do that over. Wasn't paying attention. It's going to go, the straight part is going to be on the left, and there. Okay. All right. And when the wing needle goes into where you've drawn that thread, because of the size of the wing needle and the tension of the thread, it's opening up holes in that space where the thread was drawn. I'll stop and show you what it looks like here. So this is what it looks like on the back side. All right, and then on the front, it looks like this. And it makes, I just think it's cool because the way it makes the holes in there.
I love
And
it.
then I do too. I still have a nice finished edge on the inside. So if I were gonna make the table runner, I would for sure do this kind of a hem rather than one with a raw edge on it.
It's so easy too.
Yeah, it is easy. The hardest part is pulling the thread.
Have any secrets for that?
Don't starch your fabric before you pull the thread. You can starch it afterwards, but not before,
Good
because
point.
the starch will kind of glue the fibers together, and you don't need that kind of help when you go to pull it.
Good point.
And other than that, it's got to be on the straight of grain, because when you pull a thread, that's going to be the same all the way across. And when I go to pull a thread, I try to find one that looks sturdy. Although that in linen, the diameter of the thread can vary as it goes across the fabric. It's not exactly the same, and that's what gives linen some of its look. So, does anybody need me to go through the instructions for that again? You have them somewhere, Elizabeth, because you had that class in Viking. What workbook? Mary has it too.
I do.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't tried it. I keep meaning to, but I get sidetracked.
I understand.
Yeah.
Sidetrack happens all the time.
Now, she didn't use that stitch though, right? She used a different one?
She did. She did use a different stitch.
Okay.
And I guess I can't find my sample. There it is. Yeah. She used, got too much stuff disorganized here. Okay. 10. There it is. 11. Okay, she used 3, 2. Oh, she used what I call the entredeau stitch.
You call the what?
Entredeau.
Okay.
Entredeau, I believe. Let's see what the machine says about it. There it is.
Yeah.
I didn't spell it right. If you went to a store that sold lots of lace for heirloom sewing, you could buy a strip of, it's like organdy, that it's in an insertion thing that you would put between two pieces of fabric, and they call it entredeau,
Ooh,
and it just looks like little square holes, very much like what we just did, or what I just did here, but it's just that in the middle of a strip of fabric. And she chose to do that on hers, and it looks a little different because, as you can see, the stitch is it looks like little diamonds. So instead of the blanket stitch, it's going in and out of it, of a space, but she didn't pull a thread. She just depended on the wing needle and the tensions of the thread pushing the fibers aside to make the space. Okay. With having had a pulled thread in there, it gives you a bigger space to make a bigger hole.
Judy, did you say it matters which thread you pull?
No, it just has to be the same thread all the way across.
Okay.
Okay.
So
I just like. Pardon?
If it breaks, that means you just have to find the end that broke.
Yeah, you just have to find the end where it broke and keep going.
Okay.
So, yeah. Just
Linen
don't.
I've been using, I've only been able to get maybe an inch or two at a time to come out. So,
When I did this one this morning, it all came out in one piece.
of course
So
it did.
it could be, could be the fabric, and I purposely picked a piece of fabric that was, I'm going to use the word coarse, that had bigger fibers than some of the pieces of linen I had. If it was a real smooth or had more of a lightweight linen than what I used, it would have been more difficult, I think, to pull. So I tried to stack things in my favor.
Yeah.
So anything else? Any questions about any of this that we've done today? Did it make sense?
Yeah, you do a good job of explaining it. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Lori?
Judy, yeah, I have a question. Okay, so I've got I've got a flower and one leaf, but then there's two different leaves. I still need to do that one. So then how do I put them together?
Okay, let me tell me which number of the design, do you know?
Just a second, I just had it. It was 1, 2, and 3 on the with fabric.
Okay, I want to find it in the book. Is my problem.
Yeah, that's what I just had it too, and I just lost it.
Maybe it's 263. Nope, that's the butterfly.
Oh, geez, sorry, I just lost it.
No, that's okay. Fabric. Flowers, 337. Because one of them has one of the leaves. It matters when you stitch out which leaf.
See, I think I did it wrong. Yeah, because the last leaf has texture in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think here in my okay. Yeah, because I stitched
338 through 340.
Correct. And I stitched 340 before I stitched 339. So that's what I messed up.
Okay, yeah.
I don't see how I would have got that flower. I would have put that flower on top. I don't see how I would have done that.
Are you in the book? Looking in the book?
Uh-huh.
Okay, if you look at the sequence on 340, and here on the sequence in 340, it has a placement line, and you put your fabric down and you tack it down and then trim it. And then after color number 3, that triangle.
Yeah.
And
that's where you put it together. Oh,
that's where you stack up the other two.
Oh, okay.
That's what that
Well-
triangle means.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Well, I'll just put them together and then I'm just gonna do like a hand, see if I can do a hand stitch to hold them together in the
I'm
middle.
sure you can.
Yeah. Okay. Now I learned something. Thank you.
It's still cute.
You can also just
That's what
use,
it's gonna look. That's what it's gonna look like.
yeah, just put a little mini design in the middle.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Can't she go back to where the stitch point is and stack them all and then just
Well,
use the-
she's already, well, yes, she could by just hooping a piece of stabilizer.
and then
you
put them
could
all
do
three
that.
in advance to that stitch?
Yeah.
How about Fabri-Tac?
Hey, that'll work too.
Yeah, but I think she would like the little extra stitches in the center.
Yeah, I like this texture because see, you can see on the leaf, you can see those
Oh, yeah.
little stitches. Yeah. Yeah.
But
But
if you could get, well, either way, I think it would be fine just to go ahead and put them in a naked hoop with some stabilizer and stack them up and then just do that last
yeah,
number
yeah,
4 color.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, perfect.
But good job. You jumped right in there and did your thing.
Actually got something done.
it's great.
Okay. Anything
Thank you,
else?
Judy. Thank you, Judy, as always.
You're welcome. Elizabeth, I'm waiting to see what you do with the medallion.
I'm looking forward to it. I love this linen stuff. I think it's beautiful.
It is.
Okay.
It is gorgeous. Maybe you'll inspire me to do something with my pink fabric.
Okay, I'll get on it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your input and help. And Mary, I deeply appreciate all your questions and observations. So thank you.
I appreciate you teaching us because I learn something every single time.
I know, I do too. I do too.
I think I learned more.
Judy, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. All right. Well, we'll miss you on Friday and Saturday. And
Thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Judy, I have some questions. I've never been to a